Welcome to our course on complex analysis. In this lecture, we are going to talk some applications of residues. So, hope all of us have come across the concept of Riemann integration in our analysis. Basically, in real analysis, we all might have come across the concept Riemann integration. Actually, in Riemann integration, there are two things. One is proper Riemann integrals. That is what we have learnt actually, and other one is called as improper Riemann integral. So in proper Riemann integral and improper Riemann integral, we generally have a continuous function. Okay, so some kind of discontinuity, namely jump discontinuity, is permitted, right? The function has to be continuous. Here we take a bounded interval a to b. Okay, when we have a bounded interval, that is by default a compact setter and a usual metric. Hence this function will also be a bounded one in this interval, right? So when it comes to improper Riemann integration, it is not so. We may have array. Okay, we have a continuous function which is defined throughout array. Okay, sometimes we may be in a need to integrate over this interval as well. So that means integral a to infinity f of x dx, or integral minus infinity to a f of x dx. Okay, or integral minus infinity to infinity f of x dx. Sometimes we'll have to examine this integrals as well. So these kind of integrals we call it as improper Riemann integrals, and I think this basic ideology is enough to enter into the applications of residues. Yes, uh, the need of discussing about improper Riemann integrals is we are going to apply the residues ideas into improper Riemann integrals to do the thing. Okay, so as if we have to integrate this quantity, how we are performing is that we'll convert the improper Riemann integral into a proper Riemann integral. We'll do the proper Riemann integral, and then we just take limit as r goes to infinity in that value. Okay, by integration we mean a value. Okay, we mean a finite value. Okay, so when you perform the integration, actually integrate, if you have to integrate something, you find the upper Riemann sum and lower Riemann sum, and finally you will make your the norm of a partition or the length of the partition go to 0. So that is what we say, like infimum of the upper Riemann sums and the supremum of the lower Riemann sum. So actually it involves a concept of limiting process, right? So as a limit, when it is some finite value, only then we say the limit exists. If it goes to infinity, or if it oscillates between any two values, between finite values or infinite value, we say the limit does not exist, right? So we must have some finite limit. Existence of the finite limit assures us the existence of the integral. Okay, so here with r we find some value, and when we make our r goes to infinity, that is when the limit on the right hand side exists. Here in equation 1 we have something, right? So when the limit on the right hand side exists, then we say the improper integral converges. Okay, that converges to the limit. So if suppose if it exists and is equal to L, okay, if exist, then your integral value is also equal to that L. This is what we say. The improper Riemann integral is set to converge to the particular limit, right? And if we have a continuous function which is defined throughout the real line, then integral minus infinity to infinity f of x dx, this is split into two things using the properties. Like first of all, we are going here, this shall be written as limit r1 approaches infinity and limit r2 approaches infinity, integral minus r1 to r2 f of x dx. So this shall be first of all split into this thing. Okay, using the properties of the integration, that is the properties of Riemann integration. So we just split this into minus r1 to 0 f of x dx plus integral 0 to r2 f of x dx. Now we just split these things, right? So when we split these things, limit r1 approaches infinity, limit r2 approaches infinity, integral minus r1 to 0 f of x dx plus limit r1 approaches infinity, limit r2 approaches infinity, and then we have the integral 0 to r2 f of x dx. So this is what we have. When we split things up, this is what we get, right? Here the first one is independent of r2, so when you make your r2 go to infinity, this does not affect. Similarly, the second one is independent of r1, so this does not affect, and hence we have the equation 2. Okay, so we have just made a simplification and got that integral minus infinity to infinity f of x dx can be put in this form. Okay, we have not given any assurance that the limit on the right hand side of equation 2 exists. If both the limit on the right hand side of equation 2 exist, then we say this integral converges. Okay, this convergence means what can be the limit of the convergence? Suppose if it converges to L1 and if it converges to L2, then your integral minus infinity to infinity f of x dx, this converges to L1 plus L2. Okay, so this is what is happening here, right? So moving next, we define Cauchy principal value of an integral 2. So what was the integral 2? So integral 2 is integral minus infinity to infinity f of x dx. So this improper integral. So for an improper integral, we define Cauchy principal value, which is some number, okay, which is of course going to be some number which is defined in this form. Like in order to evaluate the integral, we have we have written that as limiting case of two. Actually it involves two limits, r1 approaches infinity and r2 approaches infinity. We had the limit range from minus r1 to r2. Here we have the limit from minus r to r. Okay, we just perform this integration and finally we take r goes to infinity. If this limit exists, then the principal value, Cauchy principal value of this integral is that limit. Okay, whatever may be the limit of this case, that is going to be the Cauchy principal value, right? So now we have Cauchy principal value and the improper Riemann integral. Suppose, let us say, suppose both exist. Okay, here if your equation 2, if your equation 2 assures the convergence of the improper Riemann integral, then your principal Cauchy principal value is same as that of the integral value, right? It is just because you can actually write this into this form, just like we have split minus r1 to r2 into minus r1 to 0 and 0 to r2. Here you have minus r to 0 and 0 to r. Okay, here you have the existence of these two limits. If the existence of these two limits is true, then the existence of this limit must also be true. Okay, if this is true, then this has to be true. So if the main ideology, the conclusion that we will make here is that if your improper Riemann integral converges to some limit, then your Cauchy principal value of that integral is also the same value. Okay, it is not always necessary that if Cauchy principal value exists, then the integral has to converge. It is not so. If the integral converges, then the Cauchy principal value will exist and is the same thing. But the converse need not be true. So for which let us do a problem now. Here if you just see, principal value of this integral can be written in this form. Okay, now let us do the thing. Limit r approaches infinity, and if you just integrate x, you would get x square upon 2, and this has to be evaluated over this thing, right? So limit r approaches infinity, r squared upon 2 minus of minus r squared upon 2. So this is limit r approaches infinity, r squared upon 2 minus r squared upon 2, which is simply limit r approaches infinity to the value 0, which is simply 0. So the Cauchy principal value of this integral is 0. Now let us check whether the integral converges or not. Okay, so this integral can be split into this form. Now when we integrate, we are going to have limit r1 approaches infinity, x squared upon 2 0, like minus r1 to 0, plus limit r2 approaches infinity, x squared upon 2 0 to r2. So now when you substitute the upper and lower limits, you get 0 minus of minus r1 squared upon 2 plus limit r2 approaches infinity, and this would be r2 squared upon 2 minus 0 squared upon 2. Okay, here also we have the same. So if you just look into it, you can just take this minus outside. So it is minus of limit r1 approaches infinity, r1 square upon 2 plus limit r2 approaches infinity, r2 square upon 2. So now if you make your limit go to infinity in both the cases, you do not know what will be the resultant. Because one go to minus infinity and the other go to plus infinity, you are not very sure the resultant is 0 or it has some value. You are not very sure of the thing, right? So hence we just conclude integral minus infinity to infinity x dx does not converge. Okay, so this is an example where the Cauchy principal value exists but the integral does not converge. Okay, if the integral converges, then of course the Cauchy principal value exists and they both have the same value. Okay, so now we'll move into few more theoretical ideologies. Suppose we have an even function. So what do we mean by an even function? So it means f of x is same as that of f of minus x. This is true for all the x in the set of real numbers. So here we are considering the entire real numbers. If we have an even function which is defined on the entire real numbers, and we also assume that the Cauchy principal value exists, which means PV of minus infinity to infinity f of x dx is what? Limit r go to infinity minus r to r f of x dx. This exists. Okay, this is the assumption that we are making. So this exists. Now we can make use of the symmetry of the graph. Whenever a function is even, whether you are giving, okay, f of x1 is same as that of f of minus x1, f of x2 is same as that of f of minus x2. Okay, so this is true for all the points, right? So when you try to plot a graph of the function, if suppose this is my x1, so in that case this is going to be my minus x1, right? If my function f takes some value here, if this is my f of x1, then this is my f of minus x1. In a similar way, if this is my x2 and this takes this value f of x2, then of course here you would have some minus x2, here you would have f of minus x2. So this very well tells you that your graph of the even function is going to be symmetric about y-axis, right? So when it is so, if you try, okay, let me consider some function of this form, right? So when I try to cover the area from minus r1 to 0, like okay, so this is, let this be my minus r1 and let this be my r1. Okay, so here I think I'll have to switch color. So integral minus r1 to r1 f of x dx. So when it is from some finite numbers, you can treat the integral as the area of a curve. Okay, area under a curve, you can treat that way. So since because of the symmetry, this is same as that of 2 times of integral 0 to r1 f of x dx. Also 2 times of integral minus r1 to 0 f of x dx. Either I can just find this area and I twice it to get the total area, or I can just find out the area on the right and I twice it to get the total area. So either way it can be done. So because of that, we are writing the quantity that we have here. Okay, actually this is minus r1. That is a typographical, right? So integral minus, okay, let me just mark it in minus r1. So integral minus r1 to 0 f of x dx can be put as, okay, when you take this 2 to the other side, what do you get? So from this you can very well deduce this one. So in a similar way we are doing for r2, right? So here what we are actually going to do is that when the Cauchy principal value exists for an even function, that is going to be same as that of the integral value. So this is what we are trying to prove. Okay, so that is if f of x is even and PV of integral minus infinity to infinity f of x dx exists, then integral minus infinity to infinity f of x dx is same as that of PV of minus infinity to infinity f of x dx. So this is what we are about to prove now. Okay, so we have initiated our discussion already. So this is what we are actually trying to prove in this one. So I just informed you that one. So now if we just make a sum of these two integrals that we have, so that is integral minus r1 to 0 f of x dx plus integral 0 to r2 f of x dx. So we will have to add the corresponding right hand side as well. This is what we have, right? Now this very well tells us that if you make your limit go to 0 on both the sides, sorry, limit go to infinity, limit r1 approaches infinity and limit r2 approaches infinity, if you just take limits both the sides, limit r2 go to infinity. So when you take limit on both sides, what are you going to get? So this is independent of r2, so only r1 of x here only r2 of x, right? Here also the same. So r1 will affect in the first term and r2 will affect in the second term, right? So if this has to exist, which means limits on both the sides exist. Okay, if limit on right hand side exist means limit on left has to exist. If the limit on left has to exist, then the limit on right has to exist. Okay, so from which the limit on the left hand side is the improper Riemann integral and the limit on the right hand side is nothing but your principal value, Cauchy principal value. So that is equation 6. So this is what we intended to prove and we proved it when the function is an even one, right? So with which we can instead of write with the help of r1 and r2 we have written, so we can just write this way. So if you have to integrate from 0 to infinity, you just make limit r approaches infinity to this. So this very well tells you integral 0 to infinity f of x dx is half times of the Cauchy principal value of the integral that we have. Okay, so with this idea, we are going to evaluate some integral through residues. Okay, till now we have not involved residues into our picture. Now, how are we going to bring residues into our picture, for which we let us consider the case. What kind of integrals are to be evaluated through the residue ideas? So consider a rational function of this form. Okay, when we say rational functions, no common factor is there between p of x and q of x. Okay, so there is no common factor, and of course p of x and q of x are polynomials of some finite order. Right now, let us assume few more things. That is, okay, when actually it is not an assumption, this trivially follows. When your q of x is a polynomial, of course it will have some roots. Okay, so here we are considering these are some real polynomials. So we'll now change the real polynomial into complex polynomial just by introducing some complex value here. Okay, so it is a polynomial with real coefficients in complex variable. Okay, this will not have uh, no real zeros. Okay, so it will not have no real zeros, but it is going to have some zeros which lie above the real axis, which means if you consider this is your x-axis and it is your y-axis, then zeros of q of z, so this is finite in nature. Among this thing, no root, okay, which means no zero lie on the real axis. No zero lie on real axis, right? Then what is the assumption that we have made? There exists at least one zero above real axis, which means we must have at least one zero to this, which lie above z-axis. So it may be in the first quadrant, or it may be in the second quadrant, or it may lie along the y-axis on the imaginary axis. That is of no issue, but it has to lie above, at least one root has to lie above real axis. Okay, so suppose if we have more than one root which lie above real axis, let us name them as distinct roots. Let us name them as zn to zn. It may be anywhere. Okay, now we'll have to choose some r such that excuse me, such that in the semicircle all the roots are covered. So in order to obtain some semicircle of this form, you can choose the radius to be however large you want. Okay, you can do it. So with this, okay, here we have supposed that we have n distinct roots which lie above z-axis, sorry, which lie above real axis. So here this n is smaller than or equals degree of q of z. Okay, so here we now the things that I said you is given here. Now you can take this one to be CR, only the semicircle part, and this is minus R and this is R. So let me consider at a path travels from minus R to R. So together this minus R to R, this line segment along with the semicircle, let me treat it as a curve C. Okay, so together I am treating it as the curve C. Right, now coming back here, if I have to evaluate my integral f of z, my f of z takes the form what? F of z is written in the form of p of z upon q of z. Right? So my f of z dz is 2 pi I times of summation of the residues 1 to n residue, supposing I have n residues. Okay. Yes, of course. Here we assume that there are n zeros which lie above z-axis, sorry, which lie above real axis. So this is what we have. This C, this entire contour is now split into two things. One the semicircular path and the other real line. Hence, this may be split into integral minus r to r f of z dz plus integral over cr f of z dz equals 2 pi I times of summation k runs from 1 to n residue at z equals zk to the function f of z. So we just got this by the Cauchy residue theorem. Okay. Now we'll have to do something here, because this is a line segment on the real axis, right? So when this is a line segment on the real axis, when you try to parameterize your z, which is usually in this form, so here on the real axis our y value is 0. So your z is simply replaced by x, with x varying from r to r. Okay, so this quantity, this integral is now transferred to minus r to r f of x dx, because if you have like this, your dz is dx plus iota times of dy. Since your y is 0, your dy is also 0, that becomes dz equals dx. So integral over cr f of z dz equals 2 pi I times of the sum of the residues of the function at different points. Okay, that is what we have written here. Here, basically, we are interested in evaluating the improper integral. So that is the first quantity that we have here. So we just have that in the left side and take everything else to the other side. We have this. Now, if we just make r approaches to infinity, so this becomes integral minus infinity to infinity f of x dx, provided the limit exists. And this does not involve r, so this is some finite quantity, right? So we have this as it is, and this one here, limit r approaches infinity, integral over cr f of z dz. In order to say that we have our improper integral converge, in order to say that we'll have to prove the last quantity over here. Okay, that is this quantity is 0. As r approaches infinity, this integral tends to 0. This is what we'll have to prove. Once we establish that, then we just have, okay, so here when you make it, you are going to have Cauchy principal value of this part is equal to this one. Okay, we just proved Cauchy principal part of the improper Riemann integral is equal to the 2 pi I times of the sum of the residues of the function. In particular, if we consider the function as even means, then what happens? Principal part of the integral is same as that of the integral, provided the limit exists. If at least one of them exists, okay, this is going to be same. So using that idea, we can write like this. Since f of x is assumed to be even, this can be written as 2 times of integral minus infinity to infinity f of x dx, which is equal to 2 pi I times of the summation k runs from 1 to n residue at z equals zk f of z. So 2 on both sorry, actually 2 times of 0 to infinity. Now 2 on both sides gets cancelled and we have the equation 12. Okay, the last equation that we have, right? So if you know some even function, right, and you are asking you and if it is and if we are in a need to integrate that function f of x from 0 to infinity with the help of the residues, okay, this is a real valued function, you will have to convert this real valued function into a complex valued function and find the residues of that complex valued function. That will give you the, with that you can actually evaluate this integral. Okay, it means what? When you are trying to integrate a real valued function in an infinite interval, you may get complex values as a result. That is possible. That is one ideology that we'll have to get from this. Okay, here we have an example. Here we are asked to evaluate this integral. So for which we'll have to here your f of x is what? X squared upon x power 6 plus 1. So from which we convert this to a complex valued function f of z, that is z squared upon z power 6 plus 1. So now we'll have to find out the zeros of the denominator. So in other words, we'll have to find out the singularities of the given function. singularities of the function f of z. So the singularities are given by z power 6 plus 1 equals 0. This is nothing but z power 6 equals minus 1. Therefore, z equals minus 1 to the power 1 upon 6. Which means we'll have to find out the sixth roots of minus 1. Sixth roots of minus 1 means minus 1 multiplied with this thing. Okay, or we can just write minus 1. So if we have to write minus 1, this is cosine pi plus I sin pi. Okay, so this is cosine pi plus I sin pi to the power 1 upon 6. So we can actually write this 2k plus and everything, right? So 2k pi plus I sin 2k pi plus pi. So we just have, and we take this 6 here, and where k runs from what? 0 to 5. So when you give that values, you are going to actually have this one. Okay, when you put that in an exponential form, you are going to have this one. So among this, there are 6 roots to the denominator. 6 zeros we have. So we'll have to identify which of them lie above real axis. So if we try to examine these values, we can very well notice that only these 3 values lie above real axis. Okay, other 3 lie below real axis. If it is going to lie below real axis, we are not interested in them. We are just interested in the roots which lie above real axis. Okay, now we take some since this is the sixth roots of minus 1, when you choose your radius to be bigger than 1, so of course in that semicircle all the roots are covered inside. Okay, you can choose any radius which is bigger than 1, then the interior of the semicircular region along with the line on that real axis will cover all the regions. So we can just write this one using the ideologies that we have just seen. Okay, here this b0 is the residue at c0, b1 is the residue at c1, and b2 is the residue at c2. Okay, we know what are the c0 is e to the power I pi upon 6, c1 is iota, and c2 is e to the power I 5 pi upon 6. Okay, we have these things. Now we'll have to observe one more thing. So here all the roots occurs only once, which means these roots are simple poles to f of z. So when you have a simple pole to a function, and when you are trying to identify the residue of the function at its simple pole, then if your f of z can be written in the form of p of z upon q of z, okay, and you are trying to find out the residue at zk is a simple pole. When it is so, this is given by simply p of z upon q prime of z, and you will have to evaluate this quantity at z equals zk. This is, if we just do this, we are done. So here all the 3 which lie above real axis are simple poles. So we just do the differentiation. Okay, so we have z squared upon this thing. Here the function is z squared upon z power 6 plus 1. So when we are trying to find out the residue at some ck where k runs from 0, 1, 2 to this function, so we write the numerator as it is, and we'll have to differentiate the denominator once, and we'll have to evaluate this at the point ck. This is nothing but z squared upon 6 z to the power 5 evaluated at z equals ck. So this is nothing but 1 upon 6 z cube evaluated at the point z equals ck. Okay, so when you just substitute, you are going to get this quantity. Now we'll have to just evaluate what is ck. So we have c0 is e to the power I pi upon 6. Okay, I pi upon 6. Now let us try to evaluate what is c0. Actually c0 cube we'll have to find out what is c0. It is or or we'll just do C naught cube. That would be better, I guess. So C naught cube is what? So when you just take it inside, you are going to get E I pi upon 2. So which is cosine pi upon 2 plus I sine pi upon 2, which is nothing but what? Iota, right? So this is C naught cube. Similarly, C1 cube is what? It is iota. So iota cube is going to be minus iota. And C2 cube, it is E to the power I 5 pi by 6. I 5 pi upon 6 cube. So it is E to the power I 5 pi upon 2. So which is cosine 5 pi upon 2 plus I sine 5 pi upon 2. It is again iota. So we have calculated this one. Therefore, with which we can just say our B1 is 1 upon 6 times of iota, B2 is minus 1 upon 6 times of iota, and B3 is 1 upon 6 times of iota. We just add them up. Okay. Therefore, 2 pi I times of B0 plus B1 plus B2 is going to be this quantity. So here we would simply get this and this gets cancelled, and we'll have only this. So when we cancel this and when we cancel iota, we are left with pi upon 3. So this is what we have. Now the integral, coming back to equation 13, integral minus r to r f of x dx plus integral cr f of z dz equals 2 pi I times of this quantity we have evaluated. The right hand side we have found that it is pi upon 3. We just substitute it. Okay, and take this quantity to the other side. So we have this equation 14. Okay, now it is left to show that this quantity goes to 0 as r approaches infinity. In order to achieve it, we just observe. We have taken the radius of the semicircle to be r. So when absolute of z is r, then absolute of z square is simply r square. Okay, we have z power 6 plus 1 in the denominator, so we try to get some estimate with bigger than or equal sign, so that when you make 1 upon absolute of z power 6 plus 1, it becomes smaller than or equals 1 upon r power 6 minus 1. So when you take absolute of f of z, you are going to get actually you would get the numerator is r square, and you are going to get a r power 6 minus 1. This quantity we have taken as mr. Fine. So, and we'll have to estimate. We'll have to check the length of CR. Length of CR is what? That is the half of the perimeter of a circle. So that is the perimeter of a semicircle, which is pi r. So this is what we have. So mr pi r is this quantity. So we'll have to here one way of doing is that, okay, I just cancel r cube in the numerator. So it becomes r cube minus 1 upon r cube. Am I right? So when I make r goes to infinity, I would get pi upon infinity minus 1 upon infinity. So this is nothing but pi upon infinity minus 0, which is pi upon infinity, that is 0. So this is one way of doing it. So we see that this quantity goes to 0 as r approaches infinity. So this is one way of doing it, or if you have to divide everything by r per 6, you will get this one. So with which also we can easily prove this quantity goes to 0. Okay, so we have just established that one. So with which we just write as limit r approaches infinity, integral minus r to r x squared upon x square x power 6 plus 1 dx is pi upon 3, which is the principal Cauchy principal value of the integral. And we just now observe this function. So this is x squared upon x power 6 plus 1, right? So in the place of x, let me just substitute minus x. Even now, I am going to get this function. So which means f of minus x is same as that of f of x in spite of what x I choose. So this is an even function. When it is an even function, Cauchy principal value is same as that of the improper integral. So this just gives you to integral minus infinity to infinity x squared upon x power 6 plus 1 dx is pi upon 3. This tells you twice integral 0 to infinity x squared upon x power 6 plus 1 dx is equal to pi upon 3. So when you take the 2 to the 2 from left side to the right hand side, you would get the equation 16, and this completes the example. Thank you.